A lot of people again get confused with these terminologies like return and so forth, right? But once you understand the basics, it's not that difficult. So return, let's see what the terminology says. Return is an optional feature of a function, and you don't always have to return, use the return keyword. And what does it really mean? So here it is. A function can optionally spit out or return a value once it's invoked. So this function can spit out some value, whatever it wants. It can spit it out once it's invoked. So when it invokes, this is the invocation of the function. So when this particular function runs, when it's invoked, this particular function returns or spits out the value of A. It's going to spit it out over here, wherever it's run. Okay, so we'll look at the example, but let's look further. Once a function returns, that means when it hits this particular line, no further lines of code within the function runs. So if you write any lines of code after the return keyword is used, it's not going to run. The function is going to end over there. Okay, so now let's take a look at what that really means. So in this particular function, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. So it's in one line. It's easier for you to read and make this a little bit smaller. All right, now let's take a look. Actually, let's just make it slightly like this. All right. Now over here, we are in this particular function, we are doing console.log, and we are basically console.log simply says printed on the console. But in a real application, we don't really use the console. Console is actually used for the developer for debugging purposes. We actually do something about the application. Maybe we save information in the database. Maybe we change something on the web page. Maybe we send information out to the HTTP and the internet on our backend. So we do some kind of activity with the values that we do with our functions, right? Console is just a way to print it and see if everything's working fine, okay? So in the real world, we will not be using console.log, right? So let's say this is a function that I wrote and its job is to merge values, right? Which is a real use case. We may do a lot of these things in a real world. So this particular function's job is to simply merge, but then once it's merged, it doesn't need to send this console.log. It really needs to, its job is that, hey, once I'm done, I'm going to return the value, whatever I did, I'm going to do my processing, and whatever processing I did, I'm going to return that information to whoever called for that information. So this merge was called over here, and over here. So we can simply return whatever was merged like such. So I'm going to say return A, and this particular function, when it was run, will get the value, whatever that value is processed. So I can capture that value. So I can say var result1 is equal to whatever is over here. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing over here as well. I'm going to call it result2 and result3. So save and refresh, and nothing happens because we never printed it on the console, but basically whatever was outputted from this function got captured into these variables. Now, just for viewing purposes, again, we can actually console these values. So I'm going to put my semicolons back in. Semicolons are, by the way, optional in JavaScript. There are only a few cases where they are very important. It's a good practice to use it, but I have a habit of not using it because I know the use cases to avoid it. So for a beginner, you should start always using semicolons. But back to our case, we want to print all these values. So I'm going to do console.log. I'm going to do result1, comma, result2, comma, result3. All right, so just like this, I'm going to put my semicolon, save, and refresh. And you see me love you, I love you, and I love coding got printed because this particular function spit out the value of A to here, and this particular equal operator captured that value over here. So that is how the return keyword is used to spit out that information to whoever called it, wherever it was called. Okay, makes sense? Now, one more thing that we learned about is that once the return keyword is used, no further lines of code within that function runs. So let's say if I try to do an alert over here, alert, hi, and I'm going to do console.log, blah, 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 save. And now I'm going to refresh. Nothing happens because once a function returns, these lines of code never run. So this is actually known as dead code in the coding world because these code mean nothing. The JavaScript engine never processes them. So that's pretty much it for this video, and I'm going to talk to you in the next video. Talk to you then.